And now we face a dangerous and escalating war in Iran, which was begun in violation of international law by the extremist Netanyahu government. And the main point that I want to make today is that it is absolutely imperative that the United States not be dragged into this war. Let me say a word about how this war began. On Thursday, Netanyahu launched an illegal and unilateral surprise attack on Iran, bombing targets across the country and killing hundreds of people. Iran has responded with attacks of its own, which have killed dozens of people in Israel. Whatever you may think of the corrupt and authoritarian Iranian regime, Israel's attack clearly violated international law and the United Nations Charter.
And I think the most important thing for your audience to understand is something that most Americans don't understand, George. The United States is now at war with Iran as Israel's critical and ultimately only real ally. It's very important to understand that, because this is something that Israel, its lobby, and ultimately its agents in the United States have tried to bring on for 30 years. They've now achieved it, which explains why Mr. Netanyahu last night was almost giddy.
Okay, let's start class. So let us summarize and review where we are so far in the story. So there are three major interests, forces that are pushing the United States towards war with Iran. The first is the Israel lobby. Remember that the Israel lobby is composed of both Jewish interests as well as Christian interests, right? Representing the Jewish interest is something called AIPAC. And they have a membership of about 100,000. But they're very wealthy. There are many billionaires in this group. So this group has financial power. In fact, AIPAC is considered the second most powerful lobbying organization in the United States. The first is the pensioners, okay? There's about 30 million of them. And their lobbying organization is the most powerful. But AIPAC is second. But also in the Israel lobby are the Christian Zionists, right? So for example, the organization Christians United for Israel has 7 million people in its membership. So together, the Christian Zionists and AIPAC are extremely powerful force in government. And they want a war in the Middle East in order to advance Israel's interests. Also remember that America is now addicted to empire, because empire represents easy money. All money has to be channeled through the US. And so there are many people in the US who just basically make their money by speculating on money, okay? So for example, Wall Street. And that has made Wall Street extremely powerful right now in US politics. And the third force is Saudi Arabia. Remember that in our discussion of Saudi Arabia, we learned that the major conflict in the Middle East is actually not between Israel and Iran, but between Saudi Arabia and Iran. For Israel, Iran is a security threat because it supports Hezbollah and Hamas. But for Saudi Arabia, Iran represents a threat to its very existence. Okay? So Saudi Arabia must resolve the Iran problem soon. Right? Now, how these three forces manifest themselves is through Trump. Okay? So basically, Trump is their champion. And privately, there's a man named Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law. He's married to Trump's third daughter, Ivanka Trump, okay? And Jared Kushner happens to be very good friends with both Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the leader of Israel, as well as Mohammed bin Salman, who is the leader of Saudi Arabia. Now, Jared Kushner's father, Charles Kushner, was a very prominent sponsor of AIPAC. In fact, when Benjamin Netanyahu comes to stay in the United States, he lives with the Kushner family. So one night, Benjamin Netanyahu had to stay in Jared Kushner's bedroom, and Jared Kushner had to sleep in the basement. Okay, that's how close they are. And Jared Kushner is friendly with MBS, the leader of Saudi Arabia, so friendly that when Jared Kushner started a private equity fund, Saudi Arabia invested $2 billion. Okay? So through Jared Kushner, these three forces are able to exert influence on Trump. As we also discussed, it's very likely that Trump will become president of the United States again in November, and he will pick Nikki Haley as his VP. And that means that Nikki Haley will be the one in the Trump White House pushing for war against Iran. As we discussed, Nikki Haley makes most of her money from the Israel lobby, okay? The anti-Iran lobby. We know from the first Trump administration that these forces are able to exert tremendous influence on Trump. The evidence is, one, Trump withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal that would have secured peace between the United States and Iran. Okay? Trump moved the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in Israel, which was a major, which caused major friction in the Middle East. Okay? We also know that Trump ignored the fact that MBS killed a journalist. Okay? So we also know that Trump has been very friendly with Saudi Arabia. We also know that Trump sponsored the Abraham Accords, which is trying to bring peace between Israel and other Arab countries and unite them against Iran. Okay? The last thing that Trump did, which is the most important, is that in January 2020, Trump ordered the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, who is the leader of the who is the leader of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Okay? So from all this, we can suspect that in a second Trump term, war with Iran will be a major priority. All right, any questions before I continue? All right, is this clear so far? All right. Now let's use another mode of analysis called game theory analysis, okay? And this is what I've been teaching you this semester. And the idea is that society, what happens in the real world, is a game among human beings. Okay, and each person is trying to play this game as to optimize the outcome for that person. Okay, so the question then is, why would the United States send 100,000 troops into Iran? So let's look at the individual motivations of the individual players, okay? So you have the United States. What does the United States want to do? What does it want to do? By doing what? And accomplishing what? It wants to topple the regime in Tehran, right? And you can only do that through a ground invasion, okay? So the United States is trying to topple Iran. But then you also have other actors, okay? So Iran. What does Iran want to do? What does Iran want to do? Or basically the Revolutionary Guard Corps. What do they want to do? Right? They want to kill as many Americans as possible, okay? Do you understand? They want to force an American land invasion, okay? So Iran wants to force a U.S. invasion, knowing that if the U.S. invades, it has to lose the war, okay? It will lose the war because The Revolutionary Guard can just send suicide bombers against the United States. Okay? Now let's look at Israel. Okay? We know that the United States wants to topple Iran. We know that Iran wants to force a U.S. invasion to defeat the Americans, to humiliate the Americans, and
we did drive them to the
exact
negotiating
revenge
table.
for what happened
And my
in the past.
successor, John
Okay?
Kerry,
What does Israel want to do?
President
What
Obama
is
got a
Israel's
deal that put a lid
optimal outcome?
on Iran's
You guys
nuclear
know?
program without firing a single shot. That's diplomacy. And Donald never.
If you're Israel, what do you want to happen? Okay, so you want Iran defeated, okay? And then what do you want to happen? You want Iran defeated, you want the proxies defeated, and then what do you want to happen? Do you want the United States to stay in the Middle East? What happens if the United States? What happens if the United States and Iran both lose the war? I mean, Iran is destroyed as a country. The United States is destroyed as a military presence in the Middle East. What would happen? Israel becomes the top dog in the Middle East. Do you understand? Okay? Israel can now control the entire Middle East. So the ultimate outcome for Israel is Iran and the United States are both destroyed. Okay? You understand? How about Saudi Arabia? What is their optimal outcome? Exactly the same as Israel, exactly. Okay? You understand? Okay? Which will leave the Middle East to Saudi Arabia and Israel, but Israel is a far superior military than Saudi Arabia. Okay? Remember, it's very easy to blow up Saudi Arabia. They have oil fields, okay? Not that easy to blow up Israel. So Israel becomes a top dog. You understand game theory? In other words, all the major participants want an invasion of Iran. Okay? But they want different outcomes. And Saudi Arabia and Israel most benefit if this situation happens, where you have 100,000 US troops in the country and they can't get out, okay? Because it becomes sunk cost fallacy. The United States can only pour in more soldiers. Okay, does that make sense? All right. So is this clear to you guys? Okay? You can either use historical analysis to get to this outcome, but you can also use game theory to get to this outcome. Any questions so far? Okay, great, okay. So Celine asked the most pivotal question, okay? The United States has nuclear weapons, which is its ultimate trump card, right? So what Trump can say to Tehran is like, I have 100,000 troops in country. You have to let them go, or I will nuke you. Okay? You understand? Trump can say that. Listen, I'm Trump. I'm Donald Trump. I need to look strong. I have 100,000 troops in the country. I can't get them out of the country. So he says to Tehran, you either let them go, okay? You either guarantee him safe passage out of the country, or I will nuke you. Right? So that's what will happen. That is what Donald Trump will do. Once the situation arises, the only way for Donald Trump to save face is to threaten Tehran and says, you either let my guys go, or I will nuke the entire country. Right? So, how does Tehran get out of this situation? How do the Iranians protect themselves against this possibility? Because you're absolutely right. This is exactly what will happen if this situation will arise. Trump will respond with nuclear weapons, with a threat of nuclear weapons. So what must the Iranians do to protect themselves against this possibility? Who can help the Iranians now? Russia. Okay, do you understand? So before this war happens, Iran and Russia must come to an agreement where Putin says from the onset, no one is allowed to use nuclear weapons. Okay? If Iran uses nuclear weapons, I will nuke Iran. If the United States uses nuclear weapons, I will nuke the United States. If Israel uses nuclear weapons, I will nuke Israel. Okay? If Putin says that, how will the world react? If Putin says this, you are not allowed to use nuclear weapons, how will the world react? He's a hero, right? He saved humanity. But because he says this, the United States is now trapped. Okay? You understand? All right. So after the speech, the operation is launched. And on TV, we'll watch this on TV, on the internet together, on YouTube together, okay? And we'll be so impressed by the power of the US military. This is Iran. This is the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia. Israel is here. Red Sea is here. Iraq is here. Okay? So, in the Strait of Hormuz comes the USS Gerald R. Ford. It's a $13 billion super carrier. Okay? This thing is designed to destroy countries. It is now prowling the Strait of Hormuz to ensure that shipping is safe. America establishes air supremacy very quickly, okay? Meaning that it has complete control over the skies. Nothing can move in the skies without America detection, okay? And then a massive invasion force is sent to Iran in the south. 100,000 US troops land, maybe 200,000 Saudi Arabia troops land, okay? Maybe you have 200,000 to 500,000 troops in Iran. And they are about to strike Tehran in the north, okay? So in the south, the United States and its allies have established a foothold. They have a huge presence in the country, and they're about to attack Tehran, okay? All right. Do you understand what has happened? Okay. Now I want to ask you this question. At this point, I think the war has been decided. Who has won the war? America has established air supremacy. It controls the skies. U.S. Navy controls the seas. You have 100,000 U.S. troops in country ready to strike Tehran. The war has been decided. Who has won the war? Okay, obviously this is a trick question. Obviously Iran has won the war. Why? Why? What's the problem with this plan? Okay? This is typical American doctrine, shock and awe. This is how they fight wars. But there's a problem with this plan. What is it? Why would the Iranians want this? Okay, let's go back to traditional military doctrine, okay? In traditional military doctrine, you have three principles, right? Mass forces, avoid encirclement, protect supply lines, okay? These are three things you must absolutely obey if you are going to war, okay? So using traditional military doctrine, explain to me why the United States has lost the war right now. Exactly. First of all, they're encircled, okay? You know why? Because Iran are all mountains. It's a fortress, okay? Meaning that to get these troops into the country, you have to airdrop them, right? But guys, once you're in the country, you can't get them out of the country. You understand? Okay, so that's the first problem. They've been encircled, right? What's the second problem? Why not? Why not? That's right. And why else? Yeah, that's right, okay? So they failed to mass forces, okay? Iran is a population of 90 million people. You will need at least 3 to 4 million soldiers to even think about conquering the country. They've got 100,000 in this country, okay? And as Jack says, you can't move tanks through mountains. They're not designed for mountain warfare. What are you going to do? Okay? So they can't mass force it, and they can't, and they've been encircled, and what else is a problem? And this is the biggest problem. Exactly, they cannot be resupplied, okay? They have no supply lines. For them to be resupplied, airplanes have to drop ammunition, food, into the country. But again, Iran is all mountains. So it's very easy for Iranians to shoot down the airplanes. Does that make sense? When you pass through mountains, you can't see what's on the ground. A random guy with a rocket launcher can just shoot down the helicopter, okay? Which is what the Afghans did against the Soviets in the Afghanistan war. And that's why the Soviets lost the war. A drone can take down any airplane, okay? So, in other words, these guys are trapped. You think they're soldiers, but they're not. What they really are hostages. Okay? Does that make sense? You have too many people in the country, so you can't get them out of the country, but you don't have enough people to actually launch a strike against Tehran. You can't resupply them. And they've been encircled by Iranian forces. All right? Does that make sense? Okay? Okay. Now, the logic of having 100,000 US troops in the country is that once in the country, all the resistance to the regime will rise up and strike against Tehran. The Iranian army will